Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we are going to be talking about the Miami Heat, specifically the Heat with regards to the Damian Lillard situation. Now, I know I've already made one or two videos talking about Lillard and the trade request and all that good stuff, but for this video, I do want to come at it from this perspective of the Heat specifically because there's something a little strange that I've been noticing recently in the way that we've seen some insiders, some experts, some people in the sort of NBA's general media sphere talk about the Miami Heat. So, well, with that in mind, we'll just sort of jump straight into it. I think the quote was from Zach Lowe recently, either on his podcast or somewhere he was being interviewed or some such. He said something to the effect of, "Don't count out the Heat, don't count out Miami with or without Damian Lillard." And that was sort of the first time I noticed this trend here because I didn't think anyone was counting Miami out in the first place, regardless of what happens with this trade request. And then I started seeing a little bit more of a sentiment on, well, to be honest, on places like Twitter and Reddit, of some people saying that the Heat basically need Lillard, or they wouldn't have a shot. There's no way they would make a deep playoff run again if they don't complete the Damian Lillard trade. And that stuff seemed a little bit weird to me. I felt like people's evaluation of Miami, of the Heat, is becoming a little too closely tied to Damian Lillard to the point where people were saying, yeah, they need to trade for him, or like that previous quote I said, oh, don't count them out even if they don't get Lillard, which would imply that there were people who were doing that. And I'm sure there are, but I don't fully understand why. And I guess we'll get into that here just really quickly here, because it is an interesting situation to balance if you're Miami. On the one hand, your team just made it to the finals, right? You made a run to the finals, lost to the Nuggets, but whatever. You make it to the NBA finals with pretty much the same core group of players that you're going to have coming into this next season. So you would think that, things would be okay. On the other hand, well, they barely made it into the playoffs, right? They had to make it through the play-in. They were struggling in the regular season. They had to sort of really figure things out right there at the end leading into that playoff run. So that presented a little bit of a question. And I think I asked this question in the early offseason preview video I did for the Heat. Which version of the team is the quote unquote real version of the Heat? You would think, if you're hopeful, if you're positive, that the more recent version of the team would be closer to whatever its sort of true self is than the middling, struggling regular season squad that we saw. If that is the case, then you have to look into this next season with Miami having a similar roster as something of a positive, right? That they would be able to play closer to what we saw in the playoffs compared to what we saw from them in the regular season. That is if you are looking at it from the most positive perspective possible, because there are still a whole lot of questions about the Heat here, because while the core will be similar, while you'll still have Jimmy Butler, while you'll still have Bam Adebayo, other aspects of the scenario for the 23-24 season will not be the same, right? Kyle Lowry is going to be 37 years old, right? He's getting a little bit older. He's on the final year of his contract. We saw his minutes go down just a little bit last season, regular season and playoffs. So being on the final year of his deal and being, closer to the section of players that we would just sort of call old in the NBA, that could affect his playing time, that could affect his motivation, his health, etc., all sorts of things there. So Kyle Lowry could potentially, lose a step. The team also lost some pretty big pieces in this offseason. They traded Victor Oladipo. They lost guys like Max Strus and Gabe Vincent. They all signed with other teams. Even Cody Zeller, who maybe was not the biggest part of the roster, but was sort of pressed into service in the playoffs there when they needed someone to give Adebayo rest. Zeller signed with another team as well, I believe. So you've lost guys sort of up and down your roster, from guys like Zeller who barely saw time, guys like Oladipo who were kind of hurt a lot, to Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, who were massive parts of your rotation deep in your playoff run. So the Heat have lost quite a lot. What they've brought in to replace them is certainly not bad. Guys like Thomas Bryant were signed. Josh Richardson was brought in as well. They've got sort of exciting draft picks. They used, I want to say, the 18th pick. I don't know if that's right, but they got Jaime Jaquez Jr., who looked very exciting from what we got to see of him both in college and from a little bit of summer league. But I do have some doubts that those guys that they brought in can fully replace what the Heat lost, right? Bryant, Richardson, Jaquez Jr., they're not bad, but guys like Strus and Vincent were, actually, I'm not really sure that they were always starting, but they were around that caliber, right? Either starting players or sort of first or second guys off the bench. And I'm not sure if what they brought in will fully replace the production of what they lost. But there's also the fact that Tyler Hero is going to be coming back here, which you would think is a positive. But there are some questions for him, right? He gets hurt. He misses sort of the end of the regular season and almost all of their playoff run. Before he goes down, he's averaging over 20 points per game in the regular season. But that was also the period when the Heat were kind of struggling, when they were trying to sort of figure themselves out before they made that push to reach the play-in and then eventually play through the play-in and into the playoffs. So the question would be, does he maintain that production in this newer version of the Heat offense? Can he continue to find his place? Does the fact that his big extension kicked in change his motivations at all? We have seen some players in the past, once they secure the bag, that production kind of dips off a little bit because sometimes they're not quite as driven. We don't know that yet because we haven't gotten to see Tyler Hero play and come back yet. But all of those are questions for the Heat here, right? So it's perfectly understandable that you would think, I'm not 100% sure that the Heat can sort of make a push back to the finals, right? You really shouldn't be sure that any team can make a push back to the finals other than the Nuggets in this scenario. But it presents an interesting situation here, right? There were concerns about the Heat already before any of this other Damian Lillard stuff came through. The team's playoff run was incredible, bordering on miraculous, basically, and there's obviously no guarantee that they can do it again. But there's this perception that seems to be going around that's leading into some of these conversations that it's not just that they're guaranteed not to do it again, or it's not just that they're not guaranteed to do it again, excuse me. It's that it's impossible for them to do it again. And so they have to go trade for Damian Lillard. Otherwise, there's no way that they could make another run like what we saw from them last season. And to me, that feels disingenuous, right? And this is why I'm trying to straddle the line a little bit here. It is obvious that this Heat team has lost some stuff in this offseason, stuff that they're not sure if they're going to be able to replace. But so have some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference, right? If you look around them, the Celtics have to figure out how to incorporate Kristaps Porzingis. They need to play without Marcus Smart and Grant Williams, who were very much sort of glue guys, hustle guys that their lineup, I think, depends on a lot more than people realized. The 76ers have to figure out the Harden trade. They have to figure out what's going on with Embiid and if he's 100% committed, which, if he's not 100% committed, he's like 99% committed, but whatever. They still have to sort out the James Harden trade, right? So you have other teams in the Eastern Conference who are at the top who have some stuff to figure out. On top of that, we need to see if the Knicks and the Cavs can remain consistent. We need to see if the Atlanta Hawks do anything, right, in order to improve, or if it's just going to be the Trae Young show for another season. Teams like Chicago and Toronto are trying to avoid spinning their wheels, but they're huge question marks here as well. So the Heat's questions seem a little bit more manageable than some of the questions for half of the other teams in the East here. I don't think that they're a shoo-in, right, to finish in the top 2 or 3 in the Eastern Conference. but I think people are discrediting them a little bit more than they should. And the concerns that we outlined are not, it's not Armageddon for Miami. It's concerning. Yes, it should definitely be something that the team is looking into and trying to shore up for the future. But people are acting like this team's going to implode in a matter of days here. And I don't really get that, right? It doesn't make any sense to claim that they're the top team in the East, but it also doesn't make any sense to go to the other extreme end of that spectrum and claim that this team might not make the playoffs if they don't trade for Damian Lillard. And I think that's where we get to the actual heart of the issue here. All of this attempt to kind of sort of say like, oh, the Heat can't make a deep run without Lillard, or like Zach Lowe said, don't count them out even if they don't have Lillard. That one's a little bit more positive, right? Because he's trying to spin it as the Heat are still pretty good even if they don't trade for him. But that statement stems from the perception that the Heat won't be good without Lillard. He's trying to claim the opposite of that. But you wouldn't need to provide a counterpoint to a perspective if that perspective was not prominent, right? You wouldn't have to say, don't count Miami out with or without Lillard if you didn't think that people were counting Miami out already. And I think at the end of the day here, I should be wearing a tinfoil hat for this, but I feel like the discussion around the Heat is getting so weird because it's coming from people who are attempting to push the Damian Lillard to Miami trade as hard as they can and to try and get it done as quickly as possible. And to me, that's taking it to a little bit of a weird level, right? Obviously, yeah, there's going to be people out there who are campaigning. Lillard's people want him to go to Miami, so they're going to try and do everything that they can. We already saw earlier in the offseason, they're potentially calling up other teams who were trying to get involved in the trade to tell them to effectively back off. He had people sort of floating out there that maybe he wouldn't report if he was traded to a team he didn't want to go to, which, honestly, that rumor kind of seemed like bullshit. But the fact that they're floating it out there is just sort of another play in the playbook for Lillard's people to try and get him to where he wants to go. And now I feel like this is the next step in that plan. It's a little bit more subtle, but they are trying to create this. I'm not going to say it's an illusion because they could be right, but this perception in the media, in the fan base as well for Miami, that they need Lillard, that they need to trade for him, in order to find any sort of success, in order to maintain their position. And I suppose it's working to a certain extent because it got people talking about it. I'm here talking about it, so kind of sort of mission accomplished here, but we won't know until there actually is any news on whether Damian Lillard is being traded to Miami or not. But that's what this feels like. Like a guerrilla campaign here to try and bolster that idea that the Heat don't just want Lillard, they need Lillard. And I'm not 100% sure that they do. Will they be better with Damian Lillard on the team? Almost certainly, right? Like a 99.9% chance that this team improves dramatically if they do get Damian Lillard, right? They obviously become a scarier team in Miami, and they are one of the top contenders in the Eastern Conference if that trade happens. Absolutely. There's no possible way you can deny that unless you're just crazy or you hate Lillard or you hate the Heat, in which case, good on you, whatever. But I push back a little bit on that idea that they must trade for Lillard, that if they don't trade for Lillard, that there's no way that this team can compete. You've still got Jimmy Butler. You've still got Bam Adebayo. You lost some pieces around the edges, right? But maybe some of the guys that you picked up will come through. Maybe Huckies Jr. will have a rookie of the year kind of season. We don't know these things. And it seems a little bit strange that the idea that there's this pervading thought that so definitively is stating that the Heat won't be able to do this if they don't trade for Lillard. That just feels I used the word disingenuous before, and I think I'll use it again here. It feels like this is just a way to try and sow panic in the Heat, in their organization, in their front office, in their media, locally, and in their fan base. So I would still like to see Damian Lillard go to the Heat because that team would be insanely fun to watch. But I refuse to accept this strange narrative coming out here that the Heat are dead in the water if they don't make this trade. So that's what I wanted to sort of get off my chest here. It was sort of bugging me for a couple of days when I was seeing um some of these comments from people in the media being made, because I wasn't aware that that narrative had shifted, and maybe it hasn't, right? This could be in a 100% astroturfing sort of campaign where no one's even thinking this until people said that people are thinking it, in which case I obviously got baited into responding to it. But well, either way, got to make a video, got to talk about something that I wanted to talk about, so I count that as a win-win. But let me know what you think about where Miami stands here, obviously with or without a Damian Lillard trade. I think maybe leaning more towards the without trade. If they get Lillard, as I said, this team becomes significantly better. But where do you think the Miami Heat stand right now at this moment in the offseason with no Lillard and just what they've got returning to the lineup and the free agents and draft picks that they selected? Do you think that's enough? Are they a top team in the East? Are they a playoff team in the East? Do you think they'll have to make another sort of run through the play-in, being the 8th or 9th seed or something of that nature? But let me know where you think the expectations for Miami should be, and well, until then, we'll see if a Lillard trade actually develops or not. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.